For the most part, I haven't read most of Batman's comics, or seen all the adaptations he's been in, but all I could think about while watching this movie was Batman as a whole. Batman Year One, The Dark Knight Returns. All of these stories are talked about ad nauseum. This character has taken on a very specific meaning and perspective from the audience because of these stories. This movie was solid, but it didn't do anything that blew me away. It felt standard, and I don't think that's necessarily the fault of the animators. It just feels like a solid story that's just doing its Batman thing. Lots of good stories from this character have come out, but this one so far hasn't worked too well for me. But before I get into all that, I'm going to be discovering Gotham's roots and trying to understand what makes this story a Batman classic with Batman The Long Halloween Part 1. For starters, this story doesn't stand alone. It takes place in the same storyline as Batman Year One and those other stories. Naturally, the story doesn't take time to introduce the character as if you don't know who he is, and it doesn't try to introduce ideas for a new audience. This story was written with you knowing this character at least to some degree beforehand. The one aspect of this story that I really like is how many layers it has. At its heart, this is a mystery that spans the course of a year with people losing their lives on holidays. The one strange aspect of this movie is that it splits the story into two parts, when I don't think it should have been. I do like it when movies take their time to fully adapt their material, and not to leave things out, but not all stories necessarily fit that context. Large portions of this movie feel very drawn out, and that's strange for a storyline that takes place over an entire year. The suspect keeps getting away with his crimes, and Batman is never able to catch him. Even when he's right on his tail, he gets away on a boat while Batman watches. It just feels like this story is extremely padded, and a lot of events don't fit the story all that well. It feels more like a bunch of anthology stories put together into one movie. There's the professional crime families of Gotham, Harvey Dent, Batman being relatively new to his work, and this isn't even including the rest of his rogues gallery that appear here and eventually in part 2. This movie should not have been this long, and the fact that it's getting a second part doesn't feel earned. The movie doesn't end in a satisfactory way, and most of this movie is uneventful conversation between characters. I like dialogue-heavy stories, especially for characters that historically haven't leaned into drama-type storytelling, but it wasn't that effective here. Batman chasing Selina around town should have been cut short. The fight scene in the alleyway with the martial artists should have been shorter. So much time was devoted to Harvey and his relationship with his wife, but at least in part 1 almost nothing comes of it. Their relationship issues are established, and are just continued to be shown for the rest of the movie. I feel like this story had a lot of opportunities to speed up its plot progression very early on, but decides not to. For example, why is Batman so incapable of finding and capturing Holiday? He isn't some super skilled assassin or a strong combat fighter. He's just some guy. This story takes place over an entire year and Batman gets no leads on him this entire time. He was able to capture people like Poison Ivy, Joker, Riddler, Scarecrow, and he can't track down one guy at all? The most he has in this story on the suspect is some ideas, but that's it. A big aspect of this story is that Batman is new to being Batman, shown many times when he's with Gordon. One time he even remarked how Batman needs to be a better detective, that you can't just capture people, beat them up, and expect your answers to be solved. But he has been able to stop various other villains before now, so this aspect of him feels like a plot hole. Unless the villains in this storyline are incompetent, I don't see how this plot point makes sense. But beyond any story weaknesses, the way the story is told isn't all that engaging either. Most characters are one note and don't have much of an arc to go through. For a story that takes place over a long stretch of time, most characters are nearly the same as they were at the beginning. The most character development is shown for Bruce, but that only takes form in him questioning his methods and trying to find the best way to be Batman. When writing a story, it's important that the scenes and plot elements included have a benefit to the story as a whole. Whether it's to progress the narrative, introduce new ideas, or just some fun side idea, everything should have a purpose. But The Long Halloween Part 1 really feels like a 45-minute to an hour-long film that was stretched to be double the length. There are some effective moments in this film, but nothing that elevates it to something special. The format of this film is very similar to what they did with The Dark Knight Returns, and to be fair, those two movies have a very similar problem to this one. The first one didn't have as much interesting subject matter to tackle, because they left the meat of the story that they were adapting for the second part. The first part serves as an extended prologue to the real story, and strangely enough, I have nothing else to comment on for this movie. I imagine I will have a lot more to say about a potential part 2, since the story will conclude there. But until then, what did you think of The Long Halloween Part 1? Do you agree with my sentiments? Or are you enjoying this two-part format? How does it compare to other Batman animated stories? Let me know in the comments below. I took a short break, but a lot of series are ending soon that I plan to cover, so expect a lot of fresh videos soon. I hope to see you next time.